Hello everyone, today's tutorial will cover Vlookup and Hlookup. These are very powerful yet simple functions of Microsoft Excel that we almost use every day at work. Vlookup is one of the most popular functions. This tutorial is geared towards beginners who have never heard of the Vlookup or Hlookup before, or may be curious about what it performs in general. In this video, I will be using a simple data set to show you how to use the Vlookup and Hlookup. But typically we work with larger tables of data. All the learning you will learn in this video can be applied to any table of data, no matter how big or small it is. I'll be including a link below this video so you can download the workbook to follow along with me using the same data file, www.excelwithsama.com or just excelwithsama.com, and you will be able to download the file there. Now let's get started with Vlookup and Hlookup for beginners. Let's begin by defining what Vlookup stands for. The V stands for vertical, so it's vertical lookup. It's the process of looking up values in columns or vertical lists. Hlookup stands for horizontal lookup, which mainly involves looking up values in rows. Both Vlookup and Hlookup operate in the same manner, except that Vlookup is for vertical lookups and Hlookup is for horizontal lookups. Hlookp will be discussed later in the video, but for now, I just wanted to draw your attention to the difference between the two. You will be using the Vlookup if your data table contains column headers, and the Hlookup if your data table has row headers. If you want to skip the Vlookup and go directly to the Hlookup on the video, you can use the timestamps below the video. If you look to this data set here, which is a small set of data, you may not need to use the Vlookup. You can simply look up the values yourself. However, with large data sets with thousands or even millions of rows, the Vlookup would be more beneficial and effective. But for the purpose of this example, I've simplified the data file. We have some employee information in this data, including the name, employee code, job, department, and annual salary. Let's assume we urgently need an employee report that shows the employee's salary. I need to type the name of the employee, or let's say the code would be better, and I need Excel to bring me back the employee's salary from the data. We can use data validation to construct a drop-down menu in this case. I will cover data validation and drop-down menus in a more detailed video in the future, but for this video, let's keep it simple. I will put it in simple words. I need Excel to find the employee code I enter here in this cell and look it up in this vertical column here, since this is the column of codes, and then I need Excel to bring back the salary amount that corresponds to that employee code from this column of salaries here. This is exactly what the Vlookup performs. One thing to keep in mind about this Vlookup function is that it always returns values that are to the right of the column that was vertically searched. This means that the employee name or any value to the left of the employee code column wouldn't be returned using the Vlookup, unless we change the table range or we rearrange some of the columns, as I will demonstrate in a moment. So we can't look up a value on the right side and return a value on the left side. Some might argue that there is a workaround for this, but I'm just trying to make things simple here. And this is considered a limitation of the Vlookup function that we can overcome by moving the columns such that all the values we wish to retrieve are on the right side of the values that are looked up, or by using index and match functions or Xlookup function. In coming videos, I will cover the Xlookup and the index and match functions. But for now, I'll just focus on the Vlookup and the Hlookup functions. I will demonstrate here how the Vlookup function works before showing you how to create one on your own. If you look closely, you will find that we haven't yet entered any code in this cell, which is why it is displaying an error here. The reason is that no code has been entered to be looked up. If I type any code in this cell, let's say FN04, the Vlookup function will return $41,000, which is the corresponding salary to that code. Let's manually verify this. I will move vertically down the employee code column, since we are vertically looking up, and then I find it here. I will check the corresponding salary, and here it is. Vlookup brought back the correct salary. I'll format the numbers by holding down the Control 1 and format to show the currency. I'm going to remove the Vlookup function from this cell and start writing the function with you. I'll simply click on the cell and hit the delete key on the keyboard to delete it. I'll also delete the employee code. When typing a function, you should always start by typing the equal sign. Now when we begin to type in the letters for Vlookup, I'll just type VL. You will see that a pop-up window appears with a brief explanation of what the function performs. Looks for a value in the leftmost column of the table and returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. By default, the table must be sorted in an ascending order. This is what we previously discussed. By pressing the Tab key on the keyboard, you can pick the Vlookup highlighted in blue in this area. The syntax of the Vlookup is now visible here. In order to better understand what the Vlookup is and how it works, I will explain the syntax structure. Let's break down the Vlookup function now and examine its components or arguments. I will write the syntax at the bottom of the screen so that you can always refer to it if necessary. The Vlookup function has 4 parts or 4 arguments. These are separated by commas: the lookup value, the table array, the column index number, and the range lookup. These 4 arguments are required for the Vlookup function to operate correctly and deliver the output we need. Let's discuss each of these arguments one by one, starting with the first one, the lookup value. The employee code in this example serves as the lookup value, which is essentially the value you want the Vlookup to search for. I will type the employee code in this cell, then the cell reference will be I4, and in this case, that will serve as the lookup value. When I type the cell reference I4, you can see it is highlighted here. I'll then type a comma to move to argument number 2, which is the table array. I must choose the table or data set for this argument. In this example, the table runs from cell B3 to cell F19. But when choosing the table array for the Vlookup, I will skip the table's first column here. That's because I need the first column in the table array that I'm choosing to be the column where the Vlookup will look for the value. Therefore, I need to use the Vlookup to search up the employee code. I need to start at cell C4. This is the first cell in the column that contains data. The Vlookup function searches for a value in the first column of the table array, which is column C. I have 2 options for selecting the table array. Either I type in the cell range, or I can use the mouse to click on the first cell and drag it to the last cell in the table's bottom right corner. To demonstrate how to type in the cell range, let's erase everything up to the comma. You can see that if I begin typing in the first cell in the table, it is selected here. I will type a colon, then the final cell of the desired cell range. In this case, I want the entire table, so I'll type cell F19 here, because I know it is the last cell of the data range. The entire data range now is highlighted as an indication that is being selected. Also note that this is the table where your lookup values and your answers are located, and it has to be a single, uninterrupted continuous range. Even if you don't require some of the middle columns like column D and E, they still need to be highlighted because they are in the way of the Vlookup when returning the salary value. The table range must be continuous. You can't select multiple different ranges by holding down the control button, as the range needs to be continuous. It's very important to note that if you're looking up the employee code, the lookup value, then the employee code needs to be the first column in your table range that you select. In other words, it needs to be the first column on the left side of your table range, and the value that the Vlookup will bring will be on the right side of the table, as we will see in a minute. Now, argument number 2 is complete. I'll type a comma before moving on to argument number 3, which is the column index number. The column index number is simply the column where you want the Vlookup to search for the salary. How many columns it needs to move to the right to get the salary, which is in column F. The first column in the table array, which is column C, is where the Vlookup will begin counting. The first column in the table array, and the column where we told the Vlookup to look for the lookup value or the employee code. Even if it's not the first column on the sheet or in the data table, it is the first column of the table array that we selected in argument number 2. If we start counting considering this as the first column of the table array we chose for argument 2, which is column C, moving to the right and start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, we find the salary is in column 4. The column index number is 4 as it is the count for the column which has the answer we want. So to recap, we start counting from the first column in the table array we chose in argument number 2, not from the first column of the sheet and not from the first column of the data table. This is very important to keep in mind as it will determine the value the Vlookup will bring you, the value in column number 4. Now we are done with our third argument. I will type in a comma. Now comes our last argument, which is the range lookup. In the fourth argument, we are given the choice between true or false. True if the match is a close match, and false if it is an exact match. In our example here, we need the Vlookup to search for the exact employee code we typed in cell I4, so we will choose false. If you leave argument 4 here empty, it defaults to true, which means that an exact match is not necessary. In this situation, you need your column to be sorted in an ascending order for you to get a correct Vlookup value, if you leave the argument 4 empty or choose true. To ensure that the VLOOKUP is looking for an exact match, I usually set it to false, and I would advise you to do the same. One thing to keep in mind here is that true can be replaced by 1 and false can be replaced by 0. Once I'm done with the fourth argument, I will close the bracket and hit enter on the keyboard. If I type in the same employee code, you see it's bringing the value we had before. The VLOOKUP function is correct. Let's try type in another employee code and check. I will type in PR07 and hit enter, and the VLOOKUP brings the employee salary as $39,000. If I check row 19, I will find here the code that I typed, and the corresponding salary is $39,000. As I mentioned earlier, this is a very small table. However, with enormous data tables, the VLOOKUP is incredibly effective and time-saving. I will keep this video simple. I will not discuss what could go wrong in a VLOOKUP function, and will do a separate video later for that. Now I will demonstrate how the Hlookp works. But first, let's see if we need to make any changes in our VLOOKUP function. How do we do that? Let's say I want to search with the employee name, not the employee code, and I want the VLOOKUP to bring back the department, not the salary. I have a copy of the same exact VLOOKUP function in cell I9. To make any adjustments to the VLOOKUP function, I will click the cell where the VLOOKUP is, then click here in the formula bar and make all the changes to the function in the formula bar. The first argument will be the cell I8, as this is the cell I will be typing in the employee name, not the employee code. Argument number 2, I will need to change the table array so that the first column is the employee name column. I need to start at cell B4 and I will type B4 here. You can see the table array is highlighted. And then I need to change the column index number. In the new updated table array, the column that includes the department is column number 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll keep 4 here, and notice it will not bring the employee salary because the 4 now is the fourth column in the new table array. Once you hit enter and type the employee name in cell I8, the function has been updated to reflect the new adjustments, and now it's showing the department. I will demonstrate now how the Hlookp function works, very similar to the Vlookup function with the exception that it looks up values horizontally. I will use the same data range so you can compare how both functions are used. I will need to transpose the data, which is just turning rows into columns and columns into rows. I'll copy the table, select it, and then hit Ctrl C on the keyboard to copy it. Then come to this cell down here, right click, choose Paste Special, select Transpose from the menu, and then click OK. The data that was vertical will be transposed to reflect a horizontal orientation. You see that the row headers replaced the column headers. If your data originally was provided in this layout, which is a little bit unfamiliar, in this case we can use Hlookp function to look up the same values as we have done in the Vlookup example. I will replicate the report that we did before, and I will copy paste it down here. Now you can guess how the Hlookp function works in this case. I will start typing the equal sign in cell E38, and I will type HL, and similar to the Vlookup function, I have the HL lookup function with the same 4 arguments. The lookup value is this cell here. The table array is the same table here that we have, but we need to start selecting the employee code row because this row needs to be the first in the table array as the lookup value is the employee code. Next comes the third argument, which is the row index number. This number tells the Hlookp where the salary is located if we count from the employee code downward. 1, 2, 3, 4. The salary is on the 4th row. I will type in false or 0 for an exact match. I will copy the same employee code for the Vlookup function that we have used, so you can see that both will bring the same value for salary. I also will format the cells. I'll do the same steps, this time looking for the name. I reckon you can follow up with me here. The table array will start from this row, which contains the employee name, and will just repeat all steps again. Check the values that the Hlookp brings back. We find them accurate and the same as the Vlookup. We have learned together the Vlookup function and the Hlookp function. The Vlookup and Hlookp functions can be on one sheet, and pick up the data from another sheet, or they can be on one file and pick up the data from another Excel file. I used in this video a very simple example to explain the basis of both functions. I will demonstrate how to do a VLOOKUP from one sheet to another in a future video, and I will explain what could go wrong in a VLOOKUP function. Please let me know the kind of Microsoft Excel topics you are interested in learning so I may include them to my list of upcoming videos. I sincerely hope you found the information in this tutorial on Vlookup and Hlookup to be useful. Please let me know what topics you would like me to cover on the channel, whether it relates to Microsoft Excel, Word, PowerPoint. Please write your suggestions in the comments section below the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon with a new video tutorial.